So mega blockbuster filmmaker James Cameron has two films suspiciously missing from his HD physical media catalog. One of them being True Lies, but the other is his 1989 underwater sci-fi epic, The Abyss. So following on from his major breakout hits of The Terminator and Aliens, James Cameron had a lot of carte blanche going into his next feature film through 20th Century Fox, getting a $47 million budget for a very ambitious and a very rigorous, nightmarish production that ended up going through to make The Abyss. Now this thing was so hyped up at the time, being such a big, majorly acclaimed, innovative filmmaker. A lot of people were very interested to know what James Cameron was going to be doing, and it created a lot of stir in Hollywood to where there was even films produced well ahead of the time when The Abyss would hit theaters to potentially capitalize on what that film was going to be, an underwater sci-fi film. So you had stuff like Deep Star 6 and Leviathan and Endless Descent and all these other random movies coming out from different little studios, trying to grab a little bit of piece of that type of thing that they think people be kind of eager or whatnot to get a piece of the Abyss and kind of put these out early and quick and stuff like that. And they all bombed. And even The Abyss, this film that cost about $47 million to produce, was shot between August and December of 1988. A 140-day shoot schedule, which was just plagued with every imaginable problem you could possibly conceive of, because they were shooting everything practically underwater for this whole film, where a lot of the cheaper films were doing these kind of tricks to be kind of like dry for wet and kind of trick things out with cinematography and effects, stuff like that. James Cameron was down there in the tanks and shooting everything with the highest end type of stuff to get all this underwater photography done, and just having just a horrible time making this film. A lot of people on the film just had no good memory of doing this type of thing. I feel like Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio just has no time to really kind of recollect on the whole film. Ed Harris was kind of enjoying the sort of challenge the whole film kind of gave him as an actor and the physical demands of it. So different reactions from different people, and it was just such a big, massive type of thing that there was so much hype going into August of 1989 when the thing was going to hit theaters that it underperformed. It only got $90 million at the box office, so it was like it didn't even really get nearly what it was going to get, because you get the $47 million for the production budget, then what do you have on top of that for marketing, and the split you got to give back to the theaters. You basically make almost nothing on the whole film theatrically and have to rely on home video. And where a lot of things kind of come into a very particular light with The Abyss is on home video here, because the theatrical version was not the complete version. It was not the full scripted version that James Cameron really wanted to tell with this story, because at the time there was a lot of things he was trying to do with the visual effects. Certain things like the pseudopod sequence, which was one of the most groundbreaking digital visual effects at the time. But there were a lot of other things he wanted to do in the whole film towards the climax that Industrial Light and Magic just could not achieve the effects he wanted for those sequences, so they had to be cut for the theatrical release. And so you get the whole thing coming out on laserdisc and VHS, stuff like that, on a regular theatrical widescreen and sort of a 4x3 format for the Super 35mm printed negative, stuff like that. But in 1993, James Cameron got to do his special edition version of the film, adding about 28 minutes more of footage into the film to create a much fuller story, something that made a whole lot more sense than the theatrical cut did. Even though theatrical got a lot of praise and stuff like that from critics, there were still problems with it. A lot of people did have certain things where, like, the film didn't really work as well as it could have. There were missing plot points. There were things that didn't come completely to fruition at the end of the film. Well, with all the advances in digital effects after Terminator 2 and getting right on the cusp of Jurassic Park there, ILM has so much more advanced tools at their disposal to be able to finish the effects that James Cameron wanted to make the film the complete story he wanted it to be. And so you got so many other things with the aliens at the end of the film coming in and having much more of a deeper ecological message about all these different things with humanity kind of destroying the ecosystem and the planet and nature, stuff like that. And this giant tidal wave was going to come over and wipe out humanity, stuff like that. And just like, it just had all these different, deeper elements. It had so many other good things going for it to make it a much richer story overall. And the Laserdisc came out with a bunch of bonus features. It was a very in-depth type of thing, being THX certified, having commentary tracks, a long documentary on it, and just a wonderful insert sleeve with all this production notes and information from Cameron. It was a wonderful set. Wonderful digital sound, stuff like that, and just like, it was such a groundbreaking type of thing, just have that come out. It even premiered on the Sci-Fi Channel before it hit home video. So it's like, it was a big major type of thing to have this extended version out after we already got stuff with extended versions of the Aliens and Terminator 2 from James Cameron. This was a big event type of thing to hit home video and get this new version out there. Widescreen, all these wonderful type of things. And so it's kind of the interesting thing, along with True Lies, which came out in '94 and was a major blockbuster success with Arnold Schwarzenegger there at the kind of the last big blockbuster he ended up having before things kind of have a little bit of a taper out at the end of the '90s there. This was still an A-list Arnold film and big action and very humorous type of things to have certain things going on, where it's a little bit of a departure for James Cameron to do things a little bit more action comedy instead of sci-fi centric type of stuff, but he showed his versatility as a filmmaker to do a different type of story and keep most things in line and still have a few little issues with it. Some of the critics had some issues with it at the time. So long, kind of loses its tonal balance at certain points, but it was still a majorly innovative blockbuster for its time, for '94, a big hit. You even got a DTS laserdisc and stuff like that, but it's kind of the interesting thing where The Abyss and True Lies have been these two films in James Cameron's filmography. One, a major blockbuster success. The other one, something that was very much a disappointing film at the box office, not get the money that it really should have gotten, and various other things have gotten passed by because when they hit DVD, they were just ported over as the non-anamorphic versions from the Laserdisc. True Lies really had no bonus features to speak of. At least The Abyss had all these documentaries and little things, the commentaries they could port over, and also do the seamless branching type of thing on the DVD between the two different cuts, so you could get both of them on the same disc. But after that, it really kind of just dried up, just like, okay, they just kind of remained stagnant in this sort of old Laserdisc transfer thing poured onto a DVD, where it's like, Abyss only has one anamorphic DVD transfer, and it's over in China. Everything else is the exact same transfer that's been around since 1993. Which obviously for cinephiles and stuff like that, all as fans, really doesn't cut it. Really doesn't cut it in this age that we're in now, where it's all HD and 4K, all these big things. And just such an interesting thing, it's like, okay, it just kind of stopped. Cameron kind of lost interest or something like that, who knows, because T2 has gotten so many different releases. You go back and watch my evolution, my retrospective on the home video evolution of T2, and see just how much that film has just gotten re-released and remastered and stuff like that over the years, just repressed, and just all these new radical versions they put out as new DVDs and Blu-ray, stuff like that. It's gotten so much attention. And you got stuff with Titanic, which is one of the biggest blockbusters of all time. For 10 years, it was the highest grossing film of all time. Then of course you get Avatar later on, stuff like that, and Terminator and Aliens have always been treated very nicely on home video. They've always been given nice special edition packages and give them eventually some really, really nice Blu-ray transfers. So it's weird that these two films just kind of got stuck and nothing really happened except for True Lies, where it did get in this very short-lived digital VHS home theater format an HD 1080i release on that format. So a lot of things over the years where you'd probably see maybe a bootleg copy, which is something that's out in Spain now as a bootleg Blu-ray. This 1080i transfer or whatnot that you see out there is from that release. But The Abyss never got that. It just got kept in this sort of crusty old 4x3 letterbox format type of thing, and never got that proper re-release to get that type of thing out there for people to consume it and enjoy it and stuff like that, and just kind of remained stagnant for so many years until about 2014, where things started to have a little bit of a rumbling here and there, because HBO and Cinemax actually started screening both versions of the film on the channels. And James Cameron was kind of saying at the time why there was kind of a delay in getting the whole thing out for The Abyss, and probably July's as well, is like, oh, it's something going on with Fox over here. They're having some kind of problem. There was kind of some snippy little disagreement or something like that going on between them, and fingers getting pointed here and there. They weren't having a good time of things. But things kind of remained stagnant until maybe about 2016, where it did start airing on the Starz network here in the US, but the theatrical cut only. I did watch a little bit here and there. It looked really nice. It looked really fantastic. Finally got to see the pseudopod sequence in 1080p. Looked wonderful. And at San Diego Comic-Con that year, celebrating a 30th anniversary panel for Aliens, James Cameron said, we have a wet-gate 4K transfer, which basically means they took the film negative, put it through this sort of photochemical process to kind of clean up the scratches, all the little defects and whatnot in the film print, and get scanned in the computer and get all that type of stuff. And so it's like, everyone's like, okay, cool. Next year, we're going to get the whole thing on Blu-ray. It's going to look fantastic. We're going to be so excited. Then the next year, just like, okay, it just kind of drops on Netflix UK, just a theatrical version. Nothing else really happening, nothing stirring. 2018 comes along and nothing happens. There's no release, there's no news, there's no nothing. It just goes into the ether. Then strangely, this Instagram post shows up in March of 2019 from a guy named Skip Kimball, who's a colorist. Just shows this image of him having The Abyss on this like 4K HDR stage, saying basically, I'm doing the color grading for the HDR 4K version of The Abyss today. And everyone gets excited again. It's like, okay, we got some traction going. Things are happening again. Nothing happens. Nothing's happened since then. Absolutely nothing has happened in a year and a half since that Instagram post has happened. Nothing's happened. Obviously, in that time, 20th Century Fox, all their assets and all the film library stuff has been purchased by Disney, and everything's been kind of being transitioned over, and certainly there'd be some kind of stumbles here and there about getting certain things, there have been with some of those last couple of 20th Century Fox films being distributed theatrically, stuff like Underwater and Call of the Wild and New Mutant, stuff like that. A lot of things are just kind of stragglers and whatnot, and certainly they have a lot of things figuring out what they're going to do with their home video market, which leads us up to pretty much right now, when recently Disney has now announced that they are no longer doing 4K re-releases or remasters of live-action catalog titles. They just completely wiped it out, just like, we're not doing it anymore. They're going to focus on anime classics, and anything that's a brand new release, we'll probably give it a 4K as well, but we're not going back, we're not going to remaster anything, we're not going to do all that type of stuff, we're just kind of like, no, we're done. We're done with it. No, obviously, we got Avatar 2 coming up sometime eventually, which has been in development for like 10 years now, and it's been delayed and delayed and delayed and delayed as much as The Abyss and True Lies have been delayed on home video, on the HD home video format. Avatar 2 has been delayed just as much. So it's just the fact, like, okay, Avatar 2 will eventually come out. Maybe at that time Disney will push, let's get these remastered, let's get these versions out so we can kind of promote it. They'll probably do something. Something. Don't know what. It might drop on Disney Plus. It might drop on Hulu. Who knows what's going to happen if they actually put out a physical media release of The Abyss. Now, True Lies is also a similar story after that d-vhs type of copy went out there, and it kind of stalled out, and there have been equal amount of rumblings, just not as much documented over the time about True Lies getting up on the Blu-ray format. Apparently there have been a number of featurettes actually produced over the years for a re-release on the home video format, but none of it's seen the light of day. And so it's like, the whole thing is like, okay, we shot all this stuff, supplemental material, and for the eventual release, and everything just gets, again, stalled out, and nothing gets really good talked about. But James Cameron's had a very much kind of an odd sort of relationship with True Lies after like 9/11, stuff like that, where the complexion of terrorism in the world very much took on a very different sort of perspective and stuff like that. So he's had much less of a apparent enthusiasm about having that film being re-released and kind of revisited, stuff like that. Just a very, very different context when that film was made and where things have been after that point in time. So it's just an interesting type of thing, but there is a demand for those films to be released on these home video formats. And just the whole thing was like, okay, you can't even really get a VOD copy. You can't just buy these on VOD and own them. Again, sometimes they'll stream on Starz, or they'll show up on HBO Max or something, whoever it is. Might show up on Netflix UK, but sometimes it's just the theatrical version. Sometimes it's not, probably in 2.3.5. It might be open matted to like 16.9. So it's like you're never completely getting the complete version. The whole package, as you say. Both versions of the film, proper aspect ratios, in the best quality possible. Just like, it's always been just a little bit less than what it should be. And so it's like, the whole thing was like, The Abyss is such an important film in the history of just cinema visual effects. Because if you don't have the pseudopod sequence that he pushed for to get all that manpower put into, you don't get to T-1000. If you don't get the T-1000, you don't get Jurassic Park with the visual effects that it had, the CGI and all that type of stuff. Just like, it was a very important stepping stone after you had stuff like young Sherlock Holmes, who just had the very first fully CG animated character in a live action film. But this was like the big next step forward. Just like it was saying, just like a major film from a major filmmaker opened up people's eyes. Everyone who saw that film and saw that sequence, like it was something they'd never seen before. And it was such a major milestone and stepping stone towards everything else you had in the revolution of digital visual effects, and such a deeply important film to the history of cinema. You can't just dismiss it. You just can't bury this film and just have it not evolve with the times of the home video format. So it's like, The Abyss needs to have that sort of love and care put in. It needs to have that respect put back into it so it can, again, sort of live on in other generations. And True Lies is still an A-list Arnold film. Even if I have a few little problems with it here and there in terms of certain structure and certain things here and there, it's still a fantastic action film. After all the stuff, you had T2, and then you kind of lost things with Arnold there, with kind of like Last Action Hero kind of took a slip slide down the thing. True Lies was the next big thing up there, and everything else after that just never quite measured up as well. So it's like True Lies, like one of the last really excellent Arnold films out there, with a few little gems here and there that are a little underappreciated, but nothing that was that huge. James Cameron, Arnold Schwarzenegger, back together, big hit and everything like that. So it's like, people have like hunger for these films, and they really, really want them. They've been talking about, all these fans have been talking about this stuff for more than a decade now, almost like a decade now, to get these films in these proper treatments. And just like, it's very frustrating. Because again, James Cameron takes a decade now to make a new film, and just like it seems to like just pour all his energy into that for every thought, everything he's doing. Nothing else kind of really matters, despite the fact that he went off and did, I don't know how much he was truly involved with the 4K remaster of Terminator 2, which was very controversial about all the different things that they did with that whole thing with the scrubbing of the grain and altering the colors in very stark type of fashions, all these different things. It was a very controversial release, but he did take time to approve it, and he took time to promote it, stuff like that. But he's not taking that kind of time for these other two films. So it's a very interesting, strange type of thing why that's happened. And just the whole thing was like, we don't really have an end in sight for this whole thing. The Abyss and True Lies are just these very important films in the history of James Cameron's career, and all these different things. It's like, it's all just maybe. It's like, maybe Disney will do something when Avatar 2 comes out. No one knows for certain, because now they just announced the whole thing. We're not doing live action and 4K titles anymore. It's just very strange. It's just very strange. A lot of 20th Century Fox Blu-rays seem to be getting a little bit scarce to come by in the way I'm looking at things. Maybe that's just the times we're living in right now, where it's kind of hard to get stock back in, but just very strange. Very strange, and just like, I wish there was more news. I wish there was something we could say is definitive right now, to be like an end point in this entire conversation, because again, he's a multi-billion-dollar filmmaker at the box office. There's no reason not to release a film that was directed by James Cameron on Blu-ray, on 4K. There's just no excuse for it. There's just no excuse, except for the fact that maybe he just doesn't take the time to go through it, to approve a transfer and do stuff like that. And just like he doesn't take the time to be interested in it, and he won't sign off on it for whatever reason. So it's like everything's just speculation, but they're very important films. They really deserve that sort of respect. And so if you guys have enjoyed True Lies, especially if you've really dug into the abyss a lot and just like, man, this film just really could look amazing in 4K, tell me all about it, guys. If you watch the HD versions on streaming services or on cable, stuff like that, because even the ones on cable for like True Lies, again, it's kind of opened up to 16:9, so it's not the true theatrical aspect ratio and stuff like that. So it's like you don't get the best sound, you don't get the best picture watching it on streaming. The physical media release will get you the best version, and we just haven't gotten that yet. But guys, just like to hear what you think about these two phenomenal films, and just what you're really hoping for. What do you think the future is for these films? Is Cameron going to sign off on it? Is Disney really going to push for it? Do you think there's any hope left after all these years? If you go back and go on the Blu-ray.com forums, there's like thousands of posts stretching back 6-7 years or whatnot, probably longer than that, just talking about every piece of speculation, every piece of news, every piece of discussion you could possibly have about the potential release of these films is documented in such deep detail. But guys, get your discussion below and just talk about this stuff, and like, one way or another, you can still enjoy these films, just not in the highest end quality possible. So guys, thanks much, take care, bye bye.